Academic or applied? Does choosing one or the other affect your educational career by limiting your possibilities in the labor market? Let's find out. In theory, academic is intended for theoretical and abstract learning, preparing students for university. And applied, in theory, is the practical hands-on approach preparing students for college or the workforce. In this video, I'll be using my feminist philosophy background to critically analyze if this theory matches what's happening in reality. And I will also be using my anecdotal experience of going through the Ontario school system through a rural town in Canada. Talking about academic and applied streaming in Ontario really wouldn't be complete if I didn't do a thorough history of how it started. To start with the history of streaming in Ontario, we have to go back to 1962 with something called Robert's Plan. This was launched from Premier Robert, who at the time was governing Ontario. Robert's Plan aimed to tailor education to career paths, but resulted in socioeconomic division. The Robert's Plan, which created 3 streams, arts and science, business and commerce, and science and technology, was intended to increase graduation rates and orient education to employment. Let's look more into what exactly was the motivation of increasing the high school graduation rates and orienting education. For us to understand the motivation, we have to look back into the 1960s. It was a period of great change. Ontario was in the midst of the baby boom. With this baby boom, large number of kids were still entering high school, and the government realized that they needed to do something with the kids entering for education and for employment through that education. The Rupert's Plan of 1962 changed the Ontario secondary school forever. This was done through the introduction of what we call streaming. The intention of the Rupert's Plan was to keep more students in school. Between 1960 and 1971, the proportion of the age group 15 to 16 years old, which remained in school, rose from 62% to 77%. What I would like to know is the metrics behind the sample population. I don't know if they surveyed people directly. I also don't know the type of students they were seeing. I'd like to know the parameters within this study. Who is the sample group? What did the sample group consist of? 15 to 19 years old is very vague, and I don't know what are the socioeconomic factors within these group of people. It is very important to understand these factors, to understand what type of people were able to have the privilege of schooling at the time, and what type of people were then able to go forward in higher education. It is very important because at this time reading this, I believe then that these stats reflect more of the average prototypical run-of-the-mill white Canadian that was at the time. Let's go into a quote that dives more into Premier Robert's plan at the time. Premier Robert was proud to say that no student has been turned away from our universities because of lack of accommodation. He also said there is little point in obtaining a university degree unless it indicates academic excellence. He saw no need to trade one of these goals against the other. Without naming them, he chastised Queen's and Toronto for staying to become elite universities by requiring unreasonable high standards of admission. Admission standards, he said, should be moderate and reasonable and such as to enable the average student to proceed to a degree. While Robert stresses accessibility, his notion of accommodation is narrowly institutional, missing broader socioeconomic and identity-related barriers. Using a feminist critique, I want to point out that simply having physical accommodation, spaces and facilities does not address deeper structural barriers such as economic inequality, systemic racism, gender biases, and the cumulative disadvantage experienced by marginalized groups. True accessibility involves more than admitting students. It requires comprehensive support systems to ensure marginalized students thrive, not merely attend. Rupert's notion of admitting the average student relies heavily on vague standards that implicitly center dominant perspectives, typically white, middle class, and male norms of achievement. Using the feminist lens, we can then pose questions to ask what he considers as average and challenge the neutrality of these standards. Excellence, from a feminist perspective, should be inclusive and diverse, recognizing multiple intelligences, lived experiences, and forms of academic contribution. Without this, a supposedly accessible system continues to marginalize students who don't fit traditional molds. While Robert's plan slightly critiques universities for pursuing exclusivity, he neglects how elitism is also tied deeply to institutional histories of patriarchy, colonialism, and racial stratification. A feminist lens would push further to argue that elitism and excessively high admission standards often reinforce structural inequalities, privileging those with systemic advantages rather than genuinely rewarding merit. Roberts' approach doesn't acknowledge intersectionality, how overlapping identities, race, gender, class, disability, create compounded barriers. His moderate approach of reasonable standards might unintentionally perpetuate subtle forms of gatekeeping by overlooking specific structural disadvantages faced disproportionately by women, racialized individuals, indigenous students, or students from working class backgrounds. Roberts' statement, while appearing equitable on the surface, insufficiently addresses structural inequalities and intersectional barriers. An authentic education commitment must go beyond physical accessibility and moderate admission standards. It must deliberately dismantle systemic biases and actively redefine excellence and beyond average traditional power structures. Since we critiqued a little bit about the inception of streaming, why don't we go into the history of how much it's changed and how de-streaming wasn't really given a chance to flourish. From 1962 to 1969 was the Rupert's Plan. In 1987, George Rodwanski's report showed that students were not taught the proper skills to succeed in the modern economy using this streaming approach. Due to the report, in 1993, de-streaming was started through an initiative in grade 9. However, in 1995, the government saw that there was a negative reaction from the education community. In 1999, there started to be more flexibilities within these pathways. Then in 2017, the Toronto District School Board started to implement more of de-streaming tactics within its grade 9 curriculum. Then in 2020, the Black Lives Matter movement then led to de-streaming in all of Ontario for grade 9 in 2021. I want to stress here the Black Lives Matter movement's influence in being able to shift grade 9 to having de-streaming curriculum. Because of the Black Lives Matter movement's work, statistics on racial and socioeconomic disparities were shown through the HEQCO report, and thus led to a push to change the grade 9 curriculum to de-streaming. Because of the Black Lives Matter movement's time and energy on this subject, it helped all minorities and low-income people have a better possibility within education. Let's now go on to points for streaming and for de-streaming. Let's start first with streaming, as I personally don't really understand this perspective. So arguments for streaming, what I found was from an article from the Fraser Institute. They have 3 main points. The first is differentiated instruction to meet diverse student abilities. The second is to prevent boredom in high achievers and overwhelm struggling students. And the third is that they advocate for parental choice, allowing tailored education environments. The Fraser Institute advocates for streaming in education. However, their publication lacks specific statistical evidence directly correlating streaming with improved student outcomes. In contrast, organizations like People for Education provide data indicating that streaming disproportionately affects marginalized groups. Their 2022 report highlights that students in applied courses have significantly lower graduation rates and post-secondary enrollment compared to those in academic courses. Additionally, the Ontario government's own survey found that only 20% of principals felt adequately resourced to implement de-streaming effectively. While the Fraser Institute is grounded in educational theory, the lack of empirical data weakens its position. Conversely, the statistical evidence from People for Education and the Ontario government's findings suggest that streaming may exacerbate educational inequities. Therefore, from a data-driven standpoint, arguments against streaming appear more substantiated. Let's now go forward with the arguments against streaming. I compiled arguments that I saw online from the websites Tough Convos and People for Education. Their first point is the mirage effect. Streaming can lead students, especially those placed in lower streams, to internalize labels that negatively affect their self-perception and academic confidence. This phenomenon, often referred to as the mirage effect, suggests that students may question their intelligence and capabilities due to the stream they are placed in, rather than their actual performance. Now, a study that is referenced is Applied or Academic High-Impact Decisions for Ontario Students by Hamlin and Cameron, 2015. Published by People for Education, this report investigates the effects of academic streaming in Ontario's high schools. particularly focusing on how early course selection impacts students' outcomes and self-perception. If you're interested to see how they did the collection of this data, I highly suggest going down in the description and seeing the link for yourself. Some key findings that they found. The report highlights that grade 8 students are required to make course selections that significantly influence their academic trajectories, often without adequate support or understanding of the long-term implications. Data indicates that students from low-income families, Black and Indigenous communities, and those with special education needs are disproportionately placed in applied courses, which are associated with lower graduation rates and reduced access to post-secondary opportunities. Students in applied streams often internalize negative perceptions about their academic abilities, leading to decreased motivation and engagement, a phenomenon referred to as the mirage effect. Marginalization of low-income, Black, Indigenous, and special needs students. Evidence indicates that streaming disproportionately affects marginalized groups. Black students, Indigenous students, students with special education needs, and those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are more likely to be placed in lower academic streams. This placement correlates with reduced access to post-secondary education and employment opportunities. For instance, data reveals that students in applied courses, which are often the lower stream, have significantly lower graduation rates and post-secondary enrollment compared to their peers in academic courses. In the Toronto District School Board, Black students constitute 12.6% of the student population, but are overrepresented in special education categories. Here are the statistics. Okay, back to the video. These overrepresentations contribute to lower graduation rates and decreased post-secondary education applications and admissions among these groups. Unequal implementation due to resource disparity, deepening inequalities. The transition to Destreaming has been uneven across Ontario, primarily due to disparities in resources among schools. Schools in higher income neighborhoods are more likely to have the necessary support systems, such as smaller class sizes and additional educational resources, to effectively implement Destreaming. Conversely, schools in lower income areas often lack these supports, exacerbating existing educational inequities. A report indicates that only 20% of Ontario high school principals felt that they had sufficient support to implement Destreaming effectively. Furthermore, 96% of secondary principals reported needing increased learning supports, such as educational assistance and special education supports. Let's go more in-depth in these lower graduation and post-secondary enrollment rates. Students enrolled in applied courses, which are often considered lower academic streams, have significantly lower graduation rates and post-secondary enrollment compared to their peers in academic courses. Only 45% of students in applied courses achieved a score at or above the provincial standard in grade 9 math, compared to 84% in academic courses. 90% of students in academic courses passed the grade 10 Ontario Secondary School Literacy Test, compared to 39% in applied courses. Approximately 26% of students in grade 9 applied math, English, or French failed to graduate from high school within 5 years, compared to 5% of students in academic courses. Between 2010 and 2016, only 33% of students who took applied math and language courses in grade 9 attended post-secondary education directly after graduation, compared to 73% of students who took academic courses. What do I believe that education should strive for then? The first is equity. The Educational School Board within Ontario should strive to remove structural barriers harming marginalized groups. Differentiated learning. I think education should meet diverse learning needs within inclusive settings. Cultural transformation. I think there should be a shift in Ontario's education's belief to view all students capable of rigorous curricula. How does the current reality look like? And what are the barriers that limit this from a teacher's perspective, to my limited knowledge, as I'm not a teacher? Underfunded and overworked teachers lack resources for proper implementation. This is ginormous. Rapid policy changes lead to inadequate preparation, harming students and teachers alike. Disparity between schools in wealthy versus low-income areas impacts success of educational reforms. What's my perspective on it then? I think the issue stems primarily from teacher underfunding and insufficient planning, rather than students' capabilities or intimidation. Applied courses offer quick, easy solutions for overwhelmed teachers rather than genuine tailored education. Ethical education requires sufficient resources and planning time, something currently lacking. Having gone through the school system in Ontario, especially in a rural town which we did not have a lot of resources, I relate to what Destreaming has to offer. I went through streaming and it hurt me. I never felt intimidated by the smart kids in my class, only if those smart kids did certain actions that were on character. I felt more intimidated by my teachers, the authority figures within my class. I was supposed to go into an applied streaming, but my mom fought very hard for me to go in academic. Because of that, I was able to do academic within high school, thrive within the academic environment, and go to university. I wasn't the best student in elementary school. My specific learning type is when I don't see the teacher have a lot of passion, I don't learn the best in it. Same happened in university. However, when I was told by my grade 8 teacher that I should go in applied because I wouldn't make it in academic, and insinuated that I just simply was not cut out for that, it took a blow to my confidence. Not only that, I felt dumb because I was getting sent to applied. Now, not everyone could feel this way, but there's a lot of evidence suggesting that this is the case. And putting a category on someone at such a young age limits so much possibilities. I could have had my possibilities limited, but I had the privilege of having someone fighting for my educational rights. I was lucky to also have teachers in my academic courses that showed me that these courses are simply not made for academic students, but for all students. I'm deeply saddened to see some of my friends that I know could have excelled in academic, but were placed in the category of applied for a simple toss away because there were not enough resources in our school. Unacceptable. You might be saying, oh my God, the Ontario education system is bad, but at least they changed grade 9 to have Destreaming. No, that is not a solution because they did a halfway solution. They Destreamed grade 9 courses with some partial Destreaming in grade 10. However, academic and applied turns into college and university within high school settings in grade 11 and grade 12. They did not do Destreaming. They simply did a hybrid method, combining Destreaming in grade 9, then streaming the whole rest of the way in high school. What do I propose then? I think all schools should be fully Destreamed to reduce early limitation on student potential. No more categorization within gatekeeping courses and gatekeeping future labor possibilities. Grades 11 to 12, no more university and applied. Introduce broad career pathways rather than rigid streams. Students select a pathway reflecting interests: trades, sciences, arts, business, each pathway structured to keep multiple post-secondary options open. University, college, workforce. Courses designed to impart universally beneficial skills alongside specific knowledge. Some examples: in the trades pathway, taking English, advanced functions, visual arts, physics, and a co-op placement. Why did I choose these? I think English is a skill that all high school students should have at the highest level and should not be taught different English to learn for specific workplaces. I feel that is highly dubious. I chose math because I think math is a universal skill that all should understand. Even if you're going in the trades, it helps you within the field very much. Physics, I think, is self-explanatory as it has a lot of electrical circuits components that I think a lot of trades are beneficial, especially if down the line in trade you want to become an electrician or a specialization within a factory you're working at. Very beneficial. And a co-op placement. Get people in the trades to work with people in high schools and have that for every high school. Have that for every high school, not some that are richer. Make a curriculum that enforces this. I think the sciences look the same how they do now, with English, math, biology, chemistry, physics, and electives. Arts and business, like how it is now, flexible, emphasizing English and advanced mathematics, with electives supporting diverse post-secondary choices. Now you might be saying, oh, I took an art stream, I don't want to take math. Perfect, you don't have to. That's exactly what happens now as well too. However, I think it is beneficial that everyone learn this skill. Even if you are not good at it, I think that the teacher and the educational system you are placed within should have the proper resources to cater to your educational needs. There is no reason why a teacher should say, oh, you shouldn't learn that type of math. Those are for the engineers. What? Are we gatekeeping math only for engineers? It's a universal trait that helps with basic calculations, and you never know when you're going to have to build a fence around your house, or you never know when you're going to have to calculate the perimeter of an object. It comes in handy. Now, this specific proposed structure isn't rigid. I say it because it can be critiqued, but it's something else that doesn't limit the job prospects in the future. I say this because one, this proposed plan no longer has university, college, or academic and applied. You leave it open and you leave the job market open for people to choose different things so that they can have avenues. No longer having people going to university and then having all of the streams open, and then people who go into applied or college having one option open, or sometimes no option open. Some courses you take in college don't match up with colleges, and you have to take university courses to get in that college. Keep that in mind. I think this is a plan that could be worked with teachers, that could be worked with educators. See how it works. Remove the categorization, rather focus on systems on how to teach students in a diverse way and in a proper way that helps all students' abilities. Critique my proposed plan in the bottom. That's why it's a plan to be critiqued. I'd love to hear what you think and how to make it better. I want to say a special thank you to People for Education for the work that they're doing, for posting statistics, and with these statistics, it allows other people to feel validated that there is something tangible that shows that their experience is not only very real within real world demographics and statistics, however, it can help to change policy through laws and through evidence. I also want to thank everybody who is watching this video to the very end. A special shout out to all of you, as this is my very first YouTube video. I have many more video ideas to come, and I can't wait to explore, grow, and be better. Thank you, and I hope that I was able to teach you something more about a cause that I'm very passionate about. Bye!